Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the first live Formula 1 coverage commentary stream. Free Practice 1 from Melbourne, Australia to kick off the first official meeting of the 2017 Formula 1 season gets underway in just about 7 minutes' time. Welcome to the live commentary stream. I advise all of you to position yourself strategically so that you can see your television or whatever device you happen to be watching the actual coverage on. I obviously cannot stream actual Formula 1 content here. However, I invite you to join me and settle in for the next 90 minutes to discuss your observations and have a chat about what we might be able to expect in this year's championship. Jonah, hello, welcome to the FP1 live stream. Good to have you here. We are expecting on-track action in just about 6 minutes' time. Just to bring you up to speed as to what's going on here, again, I cannot actually stream Formula 1 coverage. However, I am going to be here for the entire 90 minutes of Free Practice 1 to share thoughts with you about what I'm seeing from the timing screens, things like that, and hopefully go over some storylines of this practice session. Of course, this is our first opportunity to see the 2017 cars, easy for me to say, running in anger here. We are expecting the teams to be sandbagging still a little bit. This is effectively the last test session or two that they have before no more holds are barred for qualifying. Of course, we will see that tomorrow. Joao, hello. Good to have you here. Have about 5 minutes to go before the start of the session. I do expect the drivers will be in the cars by this point, and I'm sure somebody will be waiting at the end of the pit lane to get out as soon as the light turns green. I don't actually have video coverage up yet here in the eastern United States. It's being covered online right now by the NBC network. I do expect that coverage to start up shortly. My arrangement here, I've got the actual coverage in one ear, and then I have the talkback from my microphone in the other one. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do here. 2 or 3 things at once, and then of course I've got the live timing screen also up. So we're going to have a whole lot of data coming in, and I will do my best to convey all of that to you in real time as the session unfolds. FP1, it is 90 minutes in length, and this was a change that was instituted a few years ago just to give the teams a little bit more testing time, because informal test sessions, ad hoc if you like, have been banned for quite a few years, and the teams asked for a compromise. We need a little bit more testing time in order to make sure that things are actually okay on our cars before we roll them out in a race situation. So that's why we have longer practice sessions nowadays. We've been seeing this for quite a few years already in Formula 1. F1 app on Windows 10. I am running the F1 live timing app on iOS on my iPhone, so I can't help you there, unfortunately. Juan Victor, thank you very, very much for your compliments. I am planning another review video coming to you very shortly. I'm expecting to do that on the Williams FW37 that VRC released a couple of days ago. In addition, Assetto Corsa have released the Mazda 787B, which of course is something that I'm very interested in, and you could probably expect something about that car in the near future as well. Thorsten, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to stream actual Formula One coverage, so you're going to have to contend with my commentary only, unfortunately. I do advise that you position yourself strategically in relation to your television or some other device on which you can watch coverage of the actual session in progress, and then you can listen to me and participate in our conversation here throughout the 90 minutes of FP1. It appears that the Formula One live global TV feed is now up, and we have about 2 minutes remaining before the green flag falls on 2017 for the first time. FP1 about to get underway, coming to us from Melbourne, Australia. The anticipation has been building for the last 4 months or so. Motorsport, of course, has a very, very long off-season, but it is always an eventful one, with Formula One teams building all new cars essentially every year, driver swaps, engine swaps, drivers retiring, drivers coming back, drivers retiring and then coming back anyway. Felipe Massa, it is all change for 2017, of course, in Formula One, with brand new aerodynamic regulations and interesting power unit regulations. Each driver only allowed 4 power units for the entirety of the season. Honda, of course, if we remember from testing, went through all 4 power units during testing. Of course, that is not out of the official allocation for the season, but there are some big-time reliability woes at McLaren. The live TV feed now showing Lewis Hamilton seated in the Mercedes. He's looking at the timing screens, much like I'm sure a lot of you are doing right now. We're within 1 minute now before the green light goes on at the end of the pit lane, and 2017 will officially be underway. We're seeing Sergio Perez in the Force India, now pretty in pink. Perez, of course, running a bit of a pink accent on his helmet as well. I've not actually seen his helmet before now, so there is a lot of pink now in the Force India garage. And it is 9 p.m. here on the east coast of the United States. FP1 has now gone green. Formula One 2017 is underway. And apparently we have Romain Grosjean out on track. The first driver out on track in anger in 2017. The TV cameras have not quite picked him up yet. However, it appears that he is going through turn 2 right now. He appears to be followed by Vettel, Magnussen, and Ericsson. And a slight delay from the world television feed. Of course, the live timing is about 40 or so seconds ahead of the television feed. However, now we are seeing images of cars out on track. Your delay may vary depending on your location from wherever you are in the world. However, I have to say, for the first time, we are seeing these 2017 cars out on track together, and they look absolutely marvelous. Since 2009, we've had these very high and narrow rear wings, but that's all been rectified now for 2017, and I must say, the cars, just from a visual standpoint, look so much more appealing. They look as Formula One cars always should look. Absolutely marvelous. Seeing Felipe Massa now coming out of the pit lane in the Williams FW40. Massa, a driver depending on your opinion, maybe he really shouldn't be here. After all, he retired at the end of 2016. However, Williams called him back saying, please drive for us because Mercedes have poached Bottas. So we need your expertise and your experience. Massa, of course, driving the Williams Mercedes this year in 2017. Thorsten, I have not actually seen the Red Bull yet on my screen. However, when I do see it, I will confirm. Seeing Sebastian Vettel now going through the final sector. Just an install lap for him in the SF70H. Very, very measured shakedown run here, it appears. I expect him to peel back into the pit lane as he does. He has dubbed his new Ferrari Gina, as far as I have been able to read on the internet, and everybody else going back into the pit lane now. Grosjean, Vettel, Magnussen, Ericsson apparently went across the start-finish line to post the first complete lap officially of 2017, 2:05.720, not exactly breaking any records there. Lewis Hamilton sitting at the end of the pit lane doing a practice start, and he has gotten underway in a hurry, I must say. He is behind the Williams of Lance Stroll, just getting up to speed in his first official Formula One session. Coming through turn one as well, Marcus Ericsson in the Sauber. Ericsson passes Stroll into turn 3. The Sauber looking very, very nice in this mid-afternoon sunshine here at Melbourne. Lance Stroll just being very measured here. His first laps, I believe, around Albert Park. He's just getting his bearings right now in this first practice session. Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes W08, it is still sporting its shark fin and the T-wing behind the shark fin. Some people have referred to these appendages as coat hangers, and yes, I do have to say there is a bit of a resemblance to a coat hanger, although I think it more resembles an old-style ham radio antenna. Interesting appendage we're seeing in 2017. The shark fins and those coat hanger winglets, if you like, it appears that they will be banned already for 2018. Team radio from Hamilton to his pit. I believe he said to the team, check the brakes when I come in. I am not entirely sure what's going on there. I assume all new brake materials on that Mercedes for this weekend, of course. As the brakes seat, they heat up, they cool down, they may change their position a little bit, and that can cause a little bit of a vibration. So Hamilton feeling something in the car that he doesn't quite like, and he's asking the team to have a look at it when he comes back into the pits, as he has done as I speak. Seeing Kevin Magnussen now sitting in the Haas, his new team. He appears to be integrating himself very nicely into this team based out of North Carolina, the only American team in Formula One, starting their sophomore season. Absolutely great to see Haas on form already in testing. They weren't at the top of the timesheets, but they are technically topping the timesheets right about now, I might say, even though things are not official yet. Seeing Fernando Alonso out on track for the first time now in the already recalcitrant McLaren Honda. Alonso made some waves yesterday in the Thursday press conference saying that if Formula One was going to be better, it would need everybody to have equal engines. Of course, the butt of that joke being Honda, who have had some absolutely terrible reliability, as we mentioned earlier. In testing, they lost 4 engines. Honda still starting their 3rd year of this renewed McLaren partnership. They cannot seem to get the formula right. They have reliability issues. They're down on power. McLaren were some 30 kilometers per hour slower down the straights in testing. Now seeing Daniel Ricciardo, the homeboy, the Australian, on track at Albert Park. Thorsten, the Red Bull is running a shark fin. Ricciardo completing the first sector here. Again, another install lap. We have seen all of the cars out on track already for an install lap, except for the Force India of Esteban Ocon. We're not entirely sure what's going on in the second Force India garage, perhaps just running a different program than everybody else. Ricciardo coming through the last 3 corners. Now he does not appear to be going all that slowly in that Red Bull. Camera's cut now back into the Mercedes garage where Lewis Hamilton is changing his boots. I'm not entirely sure if he said brakes or boots on the radio. I thought he said brakes, but perhaps he said boots as he is changing his driving boots. Daniel Ricciardo recovers to the pit lane. He will not cross start finish to set an official lap time. The order as it stands right now, without any official times posted, we have Grosjean, Vettel, Magnussen, Ericsson, Van Dorn, Massa, Hulkenberg, Palmer, Wehrlein, and Carlos Sainz, your top 10. Camera showing Daniel Kvyat in the Toro Rosso garage just going through some telemetry with one of the team personnel. Seeing himself there on the live TV feed, no doubt. I wonder if the drivers are amused by that, seeing themselves on television. I know it happens all the time for them, but if it were me, no matter how many times it happened, I would still be a little chuffed, as my British friends might say. Reach Skater, hola y bienvenidos. All cars back in the pit lane now. The session has quieted down. Teams apparently have completed their initial shakedown runs just to make sure everything is okay. We are seeing in replay here Max Verstappen throwing up a whole bunch of sparks behind his Red Bull. His Red Bull also featuring a shark fin, so Red Bull running an identical spec, at least visually, on both cars. And the second McLaren of Stoffel Van Dorn still running a rather large aero rake in front of the right-hand side pod. So McLaren apparently still doing quite a lot of developmental work. And on a second shot here of Van Dorn's car, we see that there are aero rakes, in fact, on both sides of the front end of that McLaren. So McLaren's still trying to obtain some aerodynamic data as late as FP1 here in Melbourne. That is not very encouraging for the McLaren team. Marcus Ericsson waves to the camera here with 1 hour 20 minutes remaining in FP1. In terms of who I would like to win the race, basically, I don't have a preference right now. The pecking order in 2017, it looks to be in for a little bit of a shakeup. However, it is always difficult to divine that from testing. Therefore, I would like whoever crosses the line in first position on lap 58 to be the race winner. Reasons not to run a shark fin. Essentially, I'm not entirely sure if there really is that much of an advantage to running or not running a shark fin. The rationale behind it is to exert a little bit more positive pressure laterally on the car through the corners, just to help it aerodynamically as it turns left or right. However, there weren't shark fins for pretty much all of motorsport history as we know it, so in terms of running one or not running one, I'm not entirely sure if there is an advantage or disadvantage. All the cars still in the pit lane here with 1 hour 18 minutes remaining in FP1. Most of the drivers have gotten out of the cars at this point, the mechanics just wiping them down, making some last minute adjustments here, perhaps changing setup entirely depending on whatever the test program is for this first practice session. Seeing some very close-up shots here of the front wing of the Red Bull. It appears to be a rather different spec than what we saw from launch and the first couple of days of testing back over in Spain. However, the mechanics, I'm always so amused at this, they spend every spare moment wiping the car down, polishing things up, cleaning things up, just making sure that everything is as clean and crisp as possible. The cynics among us may say, sure, that's for the TV money, the sponsors, what have you, but just the pride that these teams have in their cars and in their drivers, it is something absolutely wonderful to see. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull garage, he's had his driver overalls zipped down at the moment. He's having a rather intense discussion, it appears, with one of the engineers. Seems to me that they are making some considerable setup adjustments to the suspension on that Red Bull. Looking at Rob Smedley, working for Williams, of course. He moved from Ferrari to Williams with the departure of Felipe Massa from Ferrari at the end of 2013. And Sebastian Vettel still sitting in the Ferrari at the moment. It appears that they are preparing the car for another run. No tires fitted to it as of yet. However, most of the body panels are being re-secured at this time, and it appears Ferrari are getting ready for their first proper run of the season. Replay showing Kimi Räikkönen coming down to turn 3 over the bumps that the Albert Park circuit is so well known for. The stroboscopic effect is particularly in the later stages of the race. If we have a dry race, the trees filter the sunlight in such a way that it really makes the cars look like they're passing through some strobe lights. But some very nice slow-motion shots of Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari going through turn 3 and 4 here at this wonderfully fast and flowing Albert Park circuit. I have to say as well, that Ferrari looks like such a good car this year. The pecking order in terms of who is actually on top, Ferrari or Mercedes, still unknown at this time, and by the time sheets, Romain Grosjean is de facto leading them at the moment. However, it is safe to say that the championship fight this year most definitely is going to be between Ferrari and Mercedes, Mercedes and Ferrari in some order that is yet to be told. Choosing between pre-calc homework and a Formula 1, yes, you made the right decision, I have to say. Not necessarily for watching my stream, although I thank you very much for being here, but Formula 1, particularly the first session of the new season, definitely that wins out over pretty much any other obligation. TV cameras just showing some boats offshore of the Albert Park circuit. Lots of boaters in the water today off of Melbourne. Appears to be a very nice day in Australia. There appear to be some brisk winds, however. I do wonder if that will be impacting the performance of the cars at all. There was some speculation brought up by some of my viewers, actually, as to whether or not shark fins could actually cause problems in high winds for these cars. I'm not entirely sure if that really is a concern, considering the speed of the car is, in most cases, going to be much higher than any ambient wind conditions. However, it does beg the question, do winds affect these cars, and if so, how and by how much? Having a look in the Toro Rosso garage now. Nobody still wanting to go out on track. It appears that they just wanted this time to do an install lap and then make some setup changes to the car, perhaps some simulated qualifying runs. That all waits to be seen. We have 1 hour, 13 minutes, 10 seconds remaining in FP1, so of course still plenty of time for the teams to get out on track and do whatever it is that they may need to do for this session. Of course, there will be another practice session later on today that will also be 90 minutes in length. Camera showing Toto Wolff, the team manager over there at Mercedes. Toto Wolff indirectly has been in the news recently. His wife, Susie, former Formula One test driver and, of course, a race winner in DTM, she has rather embarrassingly lost her road license for a speeding incident. It appears that she was caught doing 35 miles per hour in a 30 mile per hour speed zone, and apparently in the UK that is grounds for losing one's license. It seems rather draconian to me, and perhaps they're using her as an example simply because she is famous and she is a racing driver. However, Susie Wolff, wife of Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff, has lost her license. For a practice session, definitely very encouraging to see a rather good crowd size at Albert Park. The camera's now just showing so many fans. They look very happy to be there. Some people are absent-mindedly texting. However, many people have their own cameras taking, I'm sure, some great pictures with those wonderful telephoto lenses that they've got, and everybody just looks to be enjoying the time. Getting some great shots now of the Haas sitting there in the garage, all plugged in, of course. The car's alive, the engine off, the wheels are off, the mechanics crawling underneath it, making some adjustments to the T-tray and the barge board area. See, the fans are plugged into the radiators just to keep everything cool. I'm sure the water and oil heaters are plugged in, keeping the engine up at operating temperature. So when Magnussen is ready to jump back in for another run, the car is all set. Camera's now showing a replay on the live feed of Magnussen going through turn 3. These wonderful slow motion shots, absolutely love them. Interesting to see on these slow motion shots some vibrations going on in the engine cover and shark fin area of the Haas. I'm pretty sure that's normal, but of course we really haven't seen any slow motion shots of these cars yet in 2017, so all of this is new. Lance Stroll going out for another run in the Williams. He is the only car out on track at this time. Stroll out of the pit lane, going very slowly now through turn 1. Again, Stroll just getting his bearings at this new circuit in this new car that he has only driven a handful of times before coming here to compete in Australia. Looks to be another install lap for the moment for the young Canadian. Stroll definitely using full power, going through the first long, sweeping right-hander into the tight chicane before going now to the golf course section of the circuit. Again, another full-throttle left-hand blast this time, heading to the fastest corner on the circuit, the quick left-right chicane. Stroll backing off considerably for that. Again, he is just warming up the tires. It appears that Stroll is running on the red sidewalled soft tires. And now coming into the third sector, very judiciously, very cautiously, again, just trying to get his bearings in this new car at this circuit. Yes, Luis, F1 is back, and we are all very, very happy about that. Stroll definitely getting on with the program now, heading through the first sector through turn 5. Very fast right-hand corner, should be flat out in these cars. Coming through the fast-sweeping right-hander, coming up to the chicane. He brakes, he turns right and left, and now back down the golf course sweeper again. 1 hour, 8 minutes, 20 seconds remaining. Stroll is on a hot lap. Coming now to the chicane. Will he be cautious? Slightly, but a lot faster than he was on his install lap. Certainly there is more pace to be had there. However, Stroll still coming to grips with this absolute monster of a machine that all the drivers will have to contend with in 2017. Stroll now coming into the third sector. 1 minute, 15 seconds already elapsed in his lap. Coming down to the final corner now. He turns left. On the power hard, slight dab of the brakes, and feeding the power in through the final corner over the curbs, pop open the DRS, and Stroll coming across the line for a lap time of 1:33.380. This, of course, is not indicative of the ultimate pace that we will likely see tomorrow in qualifying if it is dry. However, Stroll posting the first seemingly fast, decent lap of 2017, a 1:33.380. Some very nice slow motion shots again from Formula One cameras in the world feed. More vibrations going on at the rear section of that upper bodywork, the shark fin and the coat hanger wing, oscillating back and forth as we can see in these shots. It does make me wonder if those shark fins are not braced properly, because there's a lot of vibration there, and I do wonder if we may see some shark fins cracking and breaking, because some of these vibrations are rather severe, at least from what we can see on the slow motion shots. On board with Marcus Ericsson coming down to turn 1. He is being very conservative, getting on the power somewhat soon, but he is braking rather early. We are certainly not seeing the full potential of these 2017 cars yet. As we pretty much expected, there is no reason for the teams to show their full hand quite yet, particularly in the first practice session. This is still very much an abbreviated test session for most of the teams. Again, they've had very limited running so far this year. They have only had those 2 weeks of testing in Catalunya, so this is the first time that we are seeing the cars in official race trim, and the teams are still just trying to gather a little bit more data, of course. The teams will have data cataloged from last year, but the cars for 2017 are so fundamentally different this year from an aerodynamic perspective that I'm not entirely sure how relevant their 2016 or 2015 data will be. Ericsson backing off considerably through the chicane, the left and right, before getting back on the power again to start Sector 3. I'm not entirely sure he's even used 8th gear yet on this lap. Certainly just running conservatively to make sure everything's okay, trying to figure out where the grip is. And of course, that grip will improve all the time as this circuit rubbers in. There are quite a few support races that occur for the Australian Grand Prix, and the rubber that is laid down in those support races is not entirely conducive to the Formula One running. Red Bull sending a radio message to Daniel Ricciardo saying that the GPS is intermittent, at least in terms of the signal that the team is receiving. So they are going to have some trouble relaying Daniel's track position to him should he need a reference from the pits relative to traffic. Lewis Hamilton out on track as Daniel Ricciardo sets our fastest lap time thus far. Ricciardo's lap time a 1:28.294. Lewis Hamilton starts a flying lap. Breaking into turn 3, Hamilton showing a lot of confidence on the brakes already in this Mercedes, and he is on a very fast lap indeed, at least in this first sector. I wouldn't say he's quite on qualifying pace, but he's certainly going faster visually than anybody else so far. This will be a very interesting one to watch. That Mercedes W08 looking absolutely resplendent here already at Melbourne. I don't want to hazard any predictions yet for this race, but that Mercedes just looks so planted already as it goes around this circuit. Hamilton not showing any reservation already. through 9 and 10. Wow, that Mercedes turns in so aggressively, and it just grips all day long. Hard over the curbs on the exit, throwing up a lot of dust. The car did not get unsettled one little bit. Into Sector 3, Hamilton's just turning the wheel once, and boom, it is gripping. And of course, he has gone purple so far in the 2 sectors of this lap. He is 1.6 seconds ahead of the fastest time thus far. Hamilton now coming around the final corner, and DRS open to the line, full throttle, coming up to about 200 miles per hour. The lap time is a 1:26.478, 1.1 seconds in front of anybody else. Lewis Hamilton posts the fastest lap of the session thus far. World feed showing Stoffel Van Dorn looking a little bit perplexed in the McLaren garage. I am sure that they are seeing something on the telemetry that they do not quite like. We really haven't seen much of the McLarens on track. They've both done an installation lap, and then that was about it. So apparently all is not sweetness and light at McLaren, although we pretty much expected that at this point. Vettel looks to be starting a flying lap in the Ferrari. Down the start-finish straight. And over the start-finish line, Vettel on the clock. Breaking down into turn 1. The Ferrari looking a little bit nervous through turn 1. Vettel missed the apex slightly, and the car was skating a little bit around toward the exit of the corner. Vettel held it, however, and it appears that he has backed off on this lap. Camera's now picking up one of the Red Bulls. Cannot identify yet. It appears to be Daniel Ricciardo. Coming through the golf course sweeper before turning into turn 9 and 10, the fast chicane. That Red Bull also looking very, very stable through the high-speed corners. Ricciardo setting personal best times in the first 2 sectors. However, he has not gone purple. He is not in danger of relegating Lewis Hamilton to P2 on the timesheets yet, and Ricciardo is going to encounter some traffic as he comes around the final 2 corners of the lap. That will compromise his time undoubtedly. In front of him on track at least are Valtteri Bottas and Lance Stroll in the Mercedes and Williams respectively. Ricciardo crosses the line, 1:26.990. That is half a second down on Lewis Hamilton's time, and Ricciardo has backed off, going very wide at turn 1, picking up some grass actually. I do have to wonder if he was just caught out there by the traffic, getting a little bit distracted. World feed camera showing some great slow motion shots of Ricciardo going over the curbing out of turn 2. DRS open, sparks flying out from underneath the Red Bull over the curbing. Absolutely great shots. These cars look so good already this year. 100% improvement over the aesthetics that we've had since 2009. On board with Ricciardo, it's not entirely sure what happened that forced him to go wide into turn 1. He turned into the corner and the car appeared to respond accordingly, but it appeared that he just simply did not turn the steering wheel enough. I have to wonder if he was adjusting some sort of setting or answering a radio call, something to that effect. In any regard, Ricciardo's off did not appear to cause any harm to anything. Raikkonen coming around onto the start-finish straight behind Max Verstappen. Raikkonen to the line. He is on a flying lap. His time is a 1:27.160. That puts him in P4. Green in all sectors. Personal bests for Raikkonen. With 58 minutes, 30 seconds to go in this first practice session, the order is Hamilton, Bottas, Perez, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, Massa, Grosjean, Sainz, Kvyat, and Alonso. Your top 10. Alonso able to break into the top 10 in that McLaren. He is just over 1 second behind P1. Yes, the Martini livery on the Williams. I'm absolutely loving that paint scheme. Williams, of course, have been running that since 2014. Great livery, really evocative of the classic Lotus cars back in the 70s and early 80s. I love to see that livery in Formula One, and Williams have sported it very, very nicely. It would be very nice to see if Williams could get themselves a win this year. It doesn't look too likely at the moment, but Felipe Massa is very experienced, and he is definitely one of the best team players that Formula One has ever seen. So who knows, Williams could catch a lucky break at a Grand Prix this year and challenge for a victory. Certainly something I would love to see, and Felipe Massa is most certainly deserving of being able to fight for a win once again, especially considering that he wasn't even supposed to be here this year. So great to see Williams so far looking decent on pace, and Massa back in Formula One after his brief hiatus. Cameras picking up Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault. He certainly is getting on with the pace as much as the Renault can manage. That Renault definitely looks very appealing from a visual standpoint. However, its pace has had a little bit to be desired as far as we have seen so far in testing. Hülkenberg now coming up to turns 9 and 10. How's the turn in? Not quite as sharp as we saw from the Mercedes, but still very positive. Hard over that curbing, hitting the bumps very hard, it must be said, lifting the front end off the ground slightly. However, the car stayed very stable throughout all of that. Heading into the last sector now, the two right-hand bends. Hulkenberg apparently able to get on the power very early there. He has a lot of confidence in this car, so it is at least very drivable, very tractable, if not all-out quick at this time. Coming through the final corner now on the power, over the line, DRS open, and to start finish, the lap time for Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault is 1:27.568, good for P8 right now on the timesheets. In replay, we see Romain Grosjean in the Haas. In real time, we are seeing the shark fin vibrate very, very wildly here. And apparently that was the entire object of that replay, but slow motions now from the world feed, and again we are seeing lots of vibration from these shark fins. The Haas, apparently, to my eyes at least, is the worst offender with the vibrations in these shark fins, but that is absolutely extraordinary. We are seeing the entire shark fin section of that engine cover twisting itself around. That's not something I have seen on any other car so far. However, we have yet to see slow motion shots of all the cars that have shark fins, so we are just speculating here, but I think that is why there is some concern about the teams running the shark fins. Not necessarily because they give anybody an advantage or disadvantage, but if the bodywork is unstable like that, it does make me wonder if it is a potential hazard if it were to break off on track. What would that do if a car were following close behind? And maybe it's not as big a concern at a circuit like here, Albert Park, where high speeds are not sustained for quite a long time, but at circuits like Baku, Monza, Spa, where we have long straightaway blasts at full throttle and high speed, it does make me wonder about the integrity of that bodywork, particularly when it starts to have some pressure exerted on it laterally. Bottas coming through Sector 3, sliding that Mercedes around a little bit on the rear with his Scandinavian flicks. Of course, Bottas hailing from Finland. That's how all Finns drive, I'm led to believe. He is very, very quick on this lap. He has gone purple in Sector 2 by the looks of it. And Bottas to the line. The time is a 1:25.142. That puts him in P1 on the timesheets. World feed cuts to Toto Wolff in the Mercedes garage. He certainly does not look amused by his second driver going 3/10 quicker than second place man at the moment, Daniel Ricciardo. However, I am led to believe that Mercedes are just trying some things out here. Even though these lap times are very good in terms of what we were seeing from last year, I do not think that the teams have shown their true hands yet by any means. Certainly expect the lap times to fall even more by the end of this session, and certainly by qualifying. Verstappen radioing to the Red Bull pits saying that he is losing sync of the gears. That is a direct quote. I'm not entirely sure what he's referring to there. I'm wondering if he's referring to the synchronizers, the synchronization of the gearbox in terms of rev matching, so that when he downshifts, the engine will blip the throttle automatically so that the next gear comes in seamlessly. Of course, there is no foot-operated manual clutch in a Formula 1 car. The clutch is hydraulically actuated via a hand paddle controller on the back of the steering wheel, and the clutch is only used for stopping and starting. There is no need for the driver to operate the clutch while he is out on track. He simply pulls the paddles on the back side of the steering wheel up on the right and down on the left sequentially. There's no way he can miss a gear. However, if the computers or the hydraulic system is not functioning properly to give him that automatic throttle blip, particularly on the downshift, there will not be a good rev match and good synchronization for those gears to come in, and that, with these very high-strung Formula 1 gearboxes and all that torque coming out of these V6 hybrid engines, there could be a gearbox failure in short order if there is any sort of problem with the timing or synchronization in the gear shift. So we will have to watch that for Max Verstappen. At the moment, though, he is setting personal lap times on this lap, heading into the third sector. Personal best in the two sectors so far. He is currently classed as P14 on the timesheets, and he does not appear to be going any faster on this lap. He is 3 seconds behind Bottas in P1. However, he continues onto the start-finish straight, and we will see the lap time as he comes across the line. It is a 1:28.092. He advances slightly to P13. However, he is 2.9 seconds back on Bottas in P1. Slow motion replays on the world feed showing Max Verstappen into the braking zone for what looks like turn 3, the DRS slamming shut as he gets onto the brakes, and a shower of sparks coming up from the rear of that Red Bull, and now cutting to some slow motion shots also of Verstappen, this time out of turn 1 over those exit curbs. It's just great to see those skid blocks on the bottom of the car just ever so slightly caressing the tarmac and giving us that wonderful shower of sparks. I don't know if there's any real reason why they have to use materials that spark under friction, but it certainly looks very good on television. On board with Felipe Massa as he comes back into the pits. Massa currently classified P6 with a 1:26.853 as his lap time, 1.7 seconds behind Bottas in P1. Massa recovering to the Williams pits and switches it off. The vibrations for Haas would probably be better if they closed the gap in the fin. There's a possibility of that. I think you're referring to the shut line on the engine cover where the shark fin section of the bodywork appears to join up with the engine cover proper. I'm not entirely sure if that is one of the reasons why they have that vibration, if it's caused by mechanical forces or by aerodynamic forces. However, there are some big issues with that shark fin vibrating rather erratically on the Haas, and it appears to be the most severe vibration so far that we've seen out of all the teams who are running shark fins. Kimi Räikkönen in the pits. Ferrari used the opportunity to do a practice pit stop. Apparently everything went well. It looked to be a very quick stop to me, under 3 seconds for sure. Ocon in the pink Force India comes in behind Räikkönen. Force India running a fair amount of Floviz, that fluorescent green paint on the rear wing, still trying to gather some data to visualize that airflow through the rear section of the car in the quest for downforce. Development, of course, unrelenting in Formula 1. 50 minutes to go in FP1. So far, our running order is as follows. In P1, Bottas, 2. Ricciardo, 3rd. Hamilton, 4th. Räikkönen, 5th. Perez, 6th. Massa, 7th. Sainz, 8th. Grosjean, 9th. Hülkenberg, and 10th. Daniel Kvyat for the Toro Rosso. Lance Stroll, the Canadian rookie, in P11, followed by Alonso, Verstappen, Ericsson, Palmer, Vettel, Magnussen, Wehrlein, Van Dorn, and Ocon in P20 and last position. Of course, we only have 20 cars on the grid this year due to the departure of Manor before testing got underway. Manor did have their 2017 car at least in theory complete. They had a wind tunnel model, a 1/6 scale model of the car, mocked up in the wind tunnel as far as I could tell, and it did appear that they did have 2 race chassis already constructed but not entirely built up. So Manor, an unfortunate loss. They were a backmarker team, however, they did gain some fame and some points courtesy of the late Jules Bianchi at the 2014 Monaco Grand Prix, scoring them their first ever World Championship points. Manor will be missed this year, and anything that takes teams off of the grid, whether they're front runners or back markers, it's certainly not good for Formula One. I desperately wished that somebody would come to rescue Manor. If I had the resources, I definitely would have wanted to do it. However, I don't, and apparently nobody else thought it was a worthy enough investment, so a pity to see Manor gone. That means that we only have 20 cars on the grid this year. Apparently we are in for another quiet period this session. All the cars now back in the pits. Drivers are out of the cars for the most part, some even taking off their helmets and unzipping their overalls. It appears that the teams are now going to be making another raft of setup changes and some more data logging efforts before sending the cars out on what will likely be 2 more runs. It appears some of the teams have gone out to do qualifying simulations. Certainly, I would say that's the case for Mercedes, Red Bull, and at least Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari. Raikkonen, of course, in 4th position. Vettel all the way down there in P16. I don't know if Ferrari are just running 2 different programs at the moment, or if Vettel has some issues with Gina. However, Ferrari definitely in 2 very different ends of the spectrum so far. Bottas and Hamilton, however, running 1st and 3rd at the moment. They are certainly in step with each other. Ricciardo, similar story to the dynamic between Raikkonen and Vettel at Ferrari. Ricciardo running P2. Verstappen, however, all the way down there in P13. So a little bit difficult to say what the situation at Red Bull and Ferrari is at the moment. Verstappen may well have gearbox problems, however, so perhaps we shouldn't read too much into that in terms of pace thus far. However, I have to say that there could be some trouble ahead for Max Verstappen if that indeed is a gearbox problem, because of course there will be grid penalties if anybody has to make an unscheduled gearbox change. Fernando Alonso sitting in the McLaren MCL32. I still can't get used to that name. However, it appears that McLaren are prepping that car for a run. We haven't seen much of the McLarens out on track, although Alonso apparently did do a second run, which got him up to P12. The world feed now showing replays in slow motion. The McLaren porpoising quite substantially over the bumps into turn 3. We've seen McLarens do that over the years. This goes all the way back to 2005, as far as I can remember, with the MP420 coming into the final complex at Istanbul when they used to race there. Big corrugations in that section of the circuit, and the McLarens in particular always porpoised there. You would see the nose bouncing up and down quite violently, and that was a trend that continued until we stopped racing at Istanbul in 2010. So interesting to see McLaren still having that trait of making cars that react quite weirdly to bumps, it must be said. Alonso, we all know how he feels about the car. The chassis would be very good if it weren't for that Honda engine in the back of it. There was some speculation before as to whether or not McLaren could be talking to Mercedes in terms of an engine deal for this year. However, as I said before in my podcast, as well as in the test live stream from last week, I do not see McLaren able to get themselves out of that engine deal at any point before the end of this season, simply because it has been a very lean period for McLaren, and they certainly don't have the same sort of money coming in as they did before. Therefore, perhaps in years gone by, McLaren would have had the leverage to be able to buy themselves out of this contract. However, at this point, I'm going to say that that's not quite possible. McLaren certainly in a lot of trouble commercially, as well as in terms of their racing success, and Honda, unless they decide to pull out on their own volition, which apparently, if you listen to the press releases from Honda, they're still 100% committed to Formula One. They do not appear to be ready to leave this sport anytime soon, for better or worse, so McLaren apparently still locked into that relationship with Honda for the moment. World feed cameras looking into the eyes of Esteban Ocon in the Force India. That is a very pink helmet, I must say. I will reserve judgment, however, it is interesting, to say the least, to see a Formula One driver wearing a predominantly pink helmet in a predominantly pink car. I'm not entirely sure we've seen anything like that, at least in recent memory. Marcus Ericsson now getting back into the cockpit of the Sauber. He's yet to put his gloves or the steering wheel on. However, Sauber appear to be getting ready for another run. We've still not seen anybody else on track as of yet, with 42 minutes 47 seconds remaining in this first practice session. Everything is still quiet out on the Albert Park circuit. However, it appears that the teams are preparing themselves for at least 2 more runs. Kimi Räikkönen has returned to the Ferrari garage. He is sporting his trademark cap and sunglasses. I do not see an ice cream in his hand, although I'm sure he's thinking about it right now. Kimi Räikkönen probably will not be caught in too many places without an ice cream, a vodka, or both. However, Räikkönen apparently getting down to work with the engineers, surrounded by that bank of computers. A very impressive garage setup this year for Ferrari. I read someplace that Ferrari threw literally hundreds of millions of dollars at this year, trying to claw back that pace that they've lost over the last 2 seasons and really bring the fight to Mercedes this year. Apparently, so far, it appears that their investment has come up pretty good. Räikkönen running P4 behind both of the Mercedes, but again, this is just FP1, so it all remains to be seen. The Ferrari mechanics working hard on Räikkönen's car. The car is up on high stands, it would appear. The mechanics just working around the lower section of the front end now, around the side pod inlets, just trying to loosen up any fasteners that might have worked themselves loose out on track, and perhaps making some adjustments to the radiator arrangement inside the side pods. Ferrari, of course, not too keen on letting the cameras see anything too close or too conspicuous underneath that bodywork. Of course, the Formula One teams, albeit under more restrictions now in terms of what they can hide from us, it does appear that there are still some secrets being kept at Ferrari. Yes, I have to say there could well be somewhat of a delay on this stream in terms of what you're seeing on your television screens and what I'm seeing on mine. I am broadcasting from the eastern United States, and depending on where you're watching from, there could be a rather substantial delay, perhaps even up to 4 minutes. I certainly hope that is not the case. However, that is what I have to deal with, and I have no control over that, unfortunately. Lance Stroll now returning back on track. He has gone through turns 1 and 2. He is the only car out on track at the moment. Max Verstappen now joining. Verstappen on the DRS on his first lap out of the pits. That Red Bull certainly looks quick in a straight line. Braking a little bit early does Verstappen, just to start to build some temperature into those brakes and tires. Time I'm displaying on my TV feed is 4 minutes, 25 seconds. Mark, 40:25. So from the time your comment was posted to the time I gave you my mark at 40:25, that was about 10 seconds, I would say. Lance Stroll coming into the third sector on his warm-up lap out of the pits. That Williams does look like a very nice car, I must say. That livery certainly makes it look a very attractive one from a visual standpoint. And again, their pace is not all that bad. Massa running in P6 and Stroll running P11. So again, we have to give Lance Stroll a little bit of a pass here. He is brand new to this. I don't believe he's ever driven this circuit before, and certainly he has to contend with these new cars. So P11 for Lance Stroll, his teammate, much more experienced in P6. A good effort so far by the young Canadian. I'll give you another time hack at 39 minutes to go. I am displaying 39:06 right now. And mark 39 minutes. Okay, I am seeing this on the NBC Sports app. Terrestrially on American television, FP2 will be shown live. However, you can live stream it on the NBC Sports app. And I see you exactly 35 seconds behind. Interesting. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. It's just what we have to deal with at the moment. I see Lance Stroll coming through Sector 3. Coming through the final two corners. He's certainly driving very aggressively, it must be said. Into the final corner, hard on the power. I'm not sure he even lifted there. Onto the DRS, the back end swirling around over those exit curbs, and across the line, Lance Stroll, 127.219, good enough for P9. He lifts himself up into the top 10, at least for the moment. He's certainly getting on very nicely indeed. Camera's picking up Max Verstappen in the Red Bull once again, currently classified P6. He's running very slowly. It appears to be his warm-up lap out of the pits. We'll see if those potential gearbox issues have been sorted. If not, it could mean trouble for Max Verstappen should there be any gearbox changes necessary. On board on the outlap with Stoffel Vandoorne in the McLaren. This is the first onboard shot I am seeing from the McLaren, and this livery, this papaya orange, black and white livery, it looks very striking in a somewhat peculiar way on television. I'm not entirely sure what I think of it yet, particularly from this angle, although it certainly looks different, I must say. And the engine sound, in terms of how the McLaren is from an audio standpoint, it sounds exactly as it did last year. Free kicks and stuff. If I could ask you, from where are you watching? You show a 6-second delay, and other people showing a 35-second delay. Yes, I have to say, it is very exciting to have Formula One back. We've all been waiting for this for months. We've followed the car launches and testing with bated breath, but now we are seeing the cars in action, in anger for the first time, and it is absolutely wonderful to see. On board still with Stoffel Vandoorne passing through the 50-second point in the lap, about to end Sector 2. His Sector 2 time is 54.76. He is 3.6 seconds behind the pace-setting time of Valtteri Bottas through Sector 2. One sector to go, of course. He is P19 at the moment. Vandoorne through the final two corners. He's missed the apex of the penultimate corner. He's hit the apex of the final one. Hard over the exit curbs. Not as hard as we've seen some of the other drivers able to take it. Across the line for Vandoorne, a 131.048. He is 5.9 seconds off the pace of Valtteri Bottas. That is good enough for P19. He is ahead only of Esteban Ocon in the second Force India. Yes, in terms of your respective delays, that probably depends on a few different variables in terms of your location from where you're watching, your connection speeds, bandwidths, things like that. I am commentating everything in real time as I see it. If there is too much of a lag for you, again, I apologize. It's simply how telecommunications works, apparently. Renault, they have the car up on high stands. The mechanics crawled underneath the front end, making some adjustments underneath the nose cone section. Fernando Alonso out on track, going very slowly, being passed by Esteban Ocon, who puts up a shower of sparks. That certainly looked very dramatic indeed, even though that Force India is fluorescent pink. In terms of how the Force India looks, it is certainly slower than most of the field at the moment. Ocon about to complete Sector 2. His split time through Sector 2 is 54.276, 3.1 seconds behind Valtteri Bottas. That Force India, however, does look very stable and very planted underneath the Frenchman. Fernando Alonso distantly following, trying to work his way up to speed. We'll see if the McLaren Honda can manage to complete this lap and start a timed lap. At the sharp end of the timesheets, however, Daniel Ricciardo goes P1 with a 124.886. In second on the Ultra Softs right now is Valtteri Bottas, who is only 2.5 tenths behind at this time. Ocon crossing the line, 129.996, 4.8 seconds behind Daniel Ricciardo in P1. The World Feed are not showing the Red Bulls yet, and as I say it, the Red Bull shows up. We have, coming down the start-finish straight, it is Daniel Ricciardo in P1. He has just gone through turns 1 and 2. He has slowed down significantly. He set his fastest lap time of 124.886 on Super Softs. It appears that he is now going back to the pits on this lap. Your classification: Ricciardo, Bottas, Hamilton, Verstappen, Raikkonen, Massa, Perez, and Stroll. Your top 8, all covered by 1.8 seconds. Yes, I have to agree with that observation about Force India. They do take their time getting ready at the start of the season, and yes, by the time we do start the European season, they do tend to have their act together. I do remember in 2009, Fisichella really should have won the Belgian Grand Prix, so that is just an example of how Force India operate. By the time we get to mid-season, they certainly are as good as they probably will be for that given season. Valtteri Bottas is on a flyer. He is coming through the final corner now. Hard on the power. Slight lift before getting back at full throttle and opening the DRS down the start-finish straight. Across the line, he does a 124.803, fastest lap of the session. He is 83 thousandths of a second now ahead of Daniel Ricciardo in P2. That time by Bottas was set on the Ultra Softs, and Ricciardo's fastest time was set on the Super Softs. Lewis Hamilton appears to be winding up for a hot lap now. He goes through the final corner, opens the DRS. I always love to see how the cars bounce over those final curbs there, heading down the start-finish straight. Something I noticed all the way back in 2005 watching this race, and the cars still do it to this day. It just must be how the tarmac undulates in that section, but still wonderful to see that now all the way in 2017. Hamilton absolutely streaming down the infield straight out of turn 2. He is also running on the Ultra Softs. We are waiting for the first intermediate time from Lewis Hamilton. He is currently up 1/10 from Bottas at the moment. Hamilton crosses the timing beam in the first sector, and he goes purple. He is 0.185 seconds in front of Valtteri Bottas so far on this lap. Sebastian Vettel in the Ferrari garage. His overalls unzipped and helmet off. He may well be done running for today. I have to wonder if there are problems for Vettel at Ferrari. Regardless, we rejoin Lewis Hamilton. He has not set the world alight in the second sector, although he goes purple again. The intermediate sector timings that we're seeing new for this year, apparently they are not entirely accurate. Hamilton is now 3/10 up on Bottas through sector 2, and now he goes through the two right-handers. Before going into the final complex of the lap, he is now almost a half a second up on Valtteri Bottas. He turns into the penultimate corner, hitting the apex very sweetly, now into the final corner, staying somewhat wide of the apex and being very cautious over the exit curbs. DRS open, full throttle to the line. Lewis Hamilton across the line in 124.220. 0.583 seconds in front of Valtteri Bottas. Lewis Hamilton jumps to the top of the timesheets. Seeing one of the Toro Rossos now coming across start-finish. I believe it is Daniel Kvyat. Coming down into turn 1 does Kvyat. He is also on a hot lap. This is definitely qualifying simulation time for this session with 28 minutes and 40 seconds to go through turn 3 now for Kvyat. Very, very smooth and linear on the power. That car is certainly responding very, very well to his inputs. It is not skating around too much. It is not bouncing around too much. It all in all looks very tractable. At the end of Sector 1, Kvyat is 0.848 seconds behind P1. However, this is certainly a very respectable run for Toro Rosso running on the super soft tires. Through the long, sweeping left-hander into turns 9 and 10, that Toro Rosso still looking very, very planted. 1.4 seconds down on P1 through Sector 2. However, Kvyat continues on his way through Sector 3, coming down to the twin right-handers. They're not exactly identical corners, but they are both 90-degree right-handers. Whoa, very wide over those exit curbs on the first of those two right-handers. However, he held that slide, and now coming down into the final complex. Left on the power, right, slight lift, hard back on the power, pick up the exit curbs, open the DRS, and put your foot in it down the start-finish straight for a lap time of 1:26.869. That is good for P9 for Daniel Kvyat. Fair effort so far in the Toro Rosso. That Toro Rosso, hands down, is the best-looking car on the grid in terms of its aesthetics and its livery, I have to say. It will not be the fastest car this year, unfortunately. However, it is an absolute pleasure to behold for the eyes. Camera's picking up Lance Stroll, sitting there in the FW40, just studying the timesheets, much like we are doing right now. Cameras now pick up Carlos Sainz in the second Toro Rosso through turn 3. Sainz currently classified in P11, running on the soft tires. His best lap time of 1:27.151, 2.9 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton in P1. And somebody's engine out there sounds very sick. It is the Haas of Kevin Magnussen. I'm not entirely sure if he has just lifted off to allow Carlos Sainz through or if there is a problem with that Haas, but it sounded very, very rough, I must say. We're going to wait and see if the cameras pick up Magnussen again or whether or not he recovers to the pits. However, all is not quite right with that Haas, I do suspect. Kevin Magnussen does, in fact, recover to the pits, so we are just going to have to see if we get any word on what's going on in the back of that Haas. Of course, that 2017 spec Ferrari engine in the back of the VF17. We will have to see if there are any reliability issues. The engine sounded very, very sick to me. SC Best 95, I am showing... I'll give you a mark at 24:55, and mark 24:55. Daniel Kvyat coming through Sector 3. He is going quicker on this lap, although he is not in any danger of challenging the front runners. He is currently classified in P8, currently running 1.9 seconds back to Bottas in P1, coming around the final corner now. The car twitching a little bit. He has certainly picked up the pace, opening that DRS before he's even unwound the steering wheel out of the final corner. Certainly not lacking in bravery. His lap time of 1:26.514. He holds station in P8. And good to hear that we are now synced up. In replay, Valtteri Bottas going very, very wide out of turns 9 and 10. He does hold it, however. He just got onto the grass there. The under tray bouncing over those exit curbs very harshly. I do anticipate he will be making a visit to the pit lane to see if there is any damage to the under tray of that Mercedes. I do suspect that there is. Just listening there to the onboard, I didn't hear anything overtly wrong after that little incident. I didn't hear anything scraping along the tarmac, and certainly the car's behavior seemed normal, but I'm sure Mercedes will call him back into the pits just for some precautionary checks. Of course, these Formula 1 cars, because they run so low, and the curbs in some places are rather jagged and uneven, damage can occur if you run over those curbs a little bit too severely. Romain Grosjean across the line, 126.482. He remains in P9. A fair effort for the Haas team, only in their second year in Formula 1. Grosjean, of course, made headlines by finishing P6 in this race last year, which was Haas's Formula 1 debut. Absolutely wonderful start to the season that Haas had in 2016. They will certainly be looking to replicate that feat this year. Fernando Alonso back in the garage now, P12, his best lap time, 127.116, set on super softs. Alonso is not looking amused, I must say, even though I can only essentially see his eyes behind that raised helmet visor. Ocon down the start-finish straight, breaking into turn 1 in the Force India. He is going rather slowly, it must be said. I would say he is probably going to be pulling into the pits on this lap. He's late opening the DRS in the second DRS zone, and he's early on the brakes as well. Ocon definitely on a cool-down lap. Your classification: Hamilton, Bottas, Ricciardo, Verstappen, Raikkonen, Massa, Perez, Sainz, Grosjean, Kvyat, Stroll, Alonso, Ericsson, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Ocon, Verline, Palmer, Vettel, and Van Dorn. Van Dorn, P20, of course, in the McLaren Honda. Not very surprising there. Ogechi, thank you very, very much. 7 thumbs up. Wonderfully artistic slow-motion shot here of Lewis Hamilton. That Mercedes looks absolutely resplendent. Absolutely. It's not my favorite car on the grid from a visual standpoint. I said that honor goes to the Toro Rosso, but that Mercedes also looks absolutely great. And even those purple sidewalled ultra-soft tires look pretty good on that Mercedes, it must be said. Speaking of the Toro Rosso, it arrives here through the final corners in the hands of Carlos Sainz. He is currently running P11 around the final corner and down the start-finish straight. The lap time for Sainz this time around is 1:26.746, 2.5 seconds off the pace. He remains in 9th position. That Toro Rosso also looking very, very nice from these onboard shots, it must be said. Esteban Ocon about to complete Sector 2, heading into the golf course sweeper, into Turn 9. He turns in rather conservatively in that Force India. Certainly it does not have the all-out pace of the front runners. He's currently classified in P15. Coming through the final 3 corners now, turning right. Now braking left. He's missed the apex there of the penultimate corner. However, he is perfectly on line through the final corner, over the exit curbings quite hard, and now down the start-finish straight, 26, 27, over the line, 127.656. He remains P15, 3.4 seconds behind Hamilton in P1. Slow motion replay again of the shark fin on the back of that Haas. It is vibrating rather severely. In real time, you can see it as well. It is a very pronounced high-amplitude vibration. Certainly, that is something that will be degrading the performance and integrity of that carbon fiber over a Grand Prix distance. Haas did manage to complete several race distances in testing. However, I'm not entirely sure if they did any of those in consecutive fashion. Therefore, it does remain to be seen if there will be any sort of problems with those shark fins. The world feed camera is now showing the shark fin on the Sauber as it sits in the garage. The shading of the carbon that is making up that shark fin section does change rather drastically toward the outer edge of that shark fin, moving toward the rear of the car. So there is a potential that Sauber have seen a problem with the integrity of their shark fin and modified the layup of the carbon just to reinforce it a little bit. I do have to wonder if that's what the world feed cameras were trying to show us. Haas, however, it's difficult to see whether or not they have done anything like that on their shark fin, as theirs is painted and Sauber's is in bare carbon. However, I do think Haas will be looking at that quite intently after seeing that footage. That certainly is very unnerving, and if I were following that Haas and able to see that in front of me, I would certainly want to keep my distance. And we see a Ferrari on track in the hands of Kimi Räikkönen through turns 3 and 4. He is following Force India. Esteban Ocon he is following. Räikkönen apparently on a warm-up lap at this time. In terms of speed traps, we have Bottas in front at 320 clicks, Grosjean in second at 319.4, matching Hamilton in P3, Massa at 319 even, Räikkönen 318.3, Stroll 318.2, Perez 316.6, Magnussen 316.6, as is Ocon. Certainly, these cars are not lacking in straight-line speed, even though Melbourne is not a circuit that's particularly known for all-out top speed, because it is very fast and very flowing, and there are some very high-speed corners here that do require medium to high downforce. But these cars are generating a lot of horsepower. I say the front runners are generating 1,000 horsepower in qualifying trim, so drag is not as much of an issue in these cars as perhaps this aero configuration would have been had we had this in 2006, for example, the first year of the V8s, when the cars were generating about 750 horsepower. With this amount of downforce and that amount of horsepower, drag not so much a concern, and that is reflected in the straight line speeds. And yes, I do agree that these cars certainly look very, very good this year. Räikkönen across start finish to begin a hot lap. That Ferrari looking very poised through turn 1. Absolutely no surprises for Kimi Räikkönen. That car is just flat and fast. Coming into turn 3, DRS slam shut. Räikkönen able to turn in early with his trademark smooth style, just coaching the car through the corners. No surprises there. He's not wrestling the thing at all. Across the timing beam in the first sector, what is Räikkönen's time? It's 28.374 seconds, 0.447 behind Hamilton in P1. Through turns 7 and 8 now, around the long sweeping left-hand corner, up into 8th gear, about to cross the line through Sector 2, Räikkönen 51.385, 0.746 behind Hamilton's P1 time. Through 9 and 10, the fast chicane, the fastest corner on the circuit, no problems for Kimi as he begins Sector 3 through the twin right-handers. Car looking very, very stable and very responsive to his inputs. Räikkönen, just by hearing the engine, he is using very, very minimal throttle movement. He's just being very linear with all of his control inputs. And around the final corner, DRS open once again to the line. Räikkönen's lap time, a 1:25.372, 1.1 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton in P1. Sebastian Vettel is also on a hot lap at this time. He is just going into Sector 3 at the moment. He is approaching the penultimate corner. Currently classified 1.2 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton through the penultimate corner, and now through the final corner, hard on the power early over the exit curbs, pop open the DRS, and the lap time, a 1:25.464, P6, 1.24 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. Vettel and Raikkonen both running on the super softs. So far, the Mercedes are the only cars to have posted times on the ultra soft tires. Thorsten, yes, I agree with you. The V10s were producing about 1,000 horsepower. Certainly by 2005, mid-season, at very worst case in 2005, they were running 1,000 horsepower. Not entirely sure how reliably they were able to hit 1,000 horsepower, but yes, they were certainly capable of it. Perez completing Sector 1 in the Force India, 29.793, 1.8 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. Perez running on the super soft tires. Perez, of course, classified at the moment a lowly 20th and last position. Approaching the timing line in Sector 2 for Perez, 53.897, 3.2 seconds back on Hamilton's best. He is followed closely on track by Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault, who is 1.5 seconds down on Hamilton, so certainly a big disparity in pace from the Force India relative to the Renault, about 3 seconds worth. Perez through the final corner now. Again, everything looks very controlled and very smooth on that Force India, but it's just lacking all-out pace. Perez does a 129.703, 5.4 seconds down on Hamilton. Hülkenberg across the line, 126.183, 1.9 seconds down on Hamilton. So there is your difference right there, about 4 seconds between the Renault and the Force India. Vettel in the Ferrari, he's out of Sector 2, approaching Sector 3. Through the final 4 corners, 1.2 seconds down right now, classified in P7. Ferrari, yes, maybe they are testing the reliability of the sandbags. It's still unknown how much these teams are actually sandbagging. We're seeing some decent lap times at the front end of the grid. However, this is still practice, all to play for yet in qualifying. And if it's wet in qualifying, as it well may be, we might not get to see the ultimate pace of these cars until we get to round 2, which will be somewhat disappointing, I have to say. But good things come to those who wait, they say. Looking at Perez in replay now in the Force India. He's dialed in a lot of steering lock, but the shot is such a tight focus that I can't entirely see where he is on the circuit, juggling the steering a little bit. I believe he's in turn 3. Indeed he is. Not entirely sure what the drama in that shot was, other than it just looks really cool in slow motion and high definition. Lots of work going on the right rear of that Sauber. It appears that they are making some adjustments either to the rear brakes or to the right rear suspension. Similarly, some work on the suspension of the McLaren, this time working on the left front of what appears to be Alonso's car. Lewis Hamilton at the end of the pits doing a practice start. Very smooth start from Lewis Hamilton, it must be said. Certainly they are practicing the new clutch procedure for this year. Unlike previous years where, first of all, engineers were able to tell the drivers what clutch map to put the steering wheel into before the start, and unlike previous years where they were able to have non-linear clutch maps with the input of the paddle versus the output of the actual clutch mechanism, there was the ability in years gone by to put a neutral spot in the clutch map so that the driver only had to get the clutch bite point within about 80% of what the actual clutch movement was. So in other words, the driver could release the clutch paddle halfway, find the perfect bite point every time, and make the perfect start. Now, the teams have to map a linear clutch map into that paddle on the back of the steering wheel, meaning that 0% clutch application is 0% clutch engagement, 50% movement on the paddle is 50% clutch engagement, etc. So just like any of you who drive a manual car in the real world, where you just have to learn going from car to car or learning how to drive a manual for the first time, you just have to learn to feel the bite point. That is what now the drivers are going to have to do in 2017. But it's even more difficult to do in a Formula One car than it is a road car, because these are hand-operated clutches, so you don't have that ability to feel through your leg where that bite point is. So it's just all muscle memory for these drivers. Lewis Hamilton across start-finish. I would say he's going to be starting a hot lap, but his DRS was not open. I wonder if he simply forgot to hit the button, but Lewis Hamilton certainly going quickly. Lewis Hamilton through Sector 1, 29.393. He is down 1.7 seconds on his best time, session-leading time. Therefore, I have to say that he is running some sort of a different program. Either that or the timing is a little screwed up, because the on-screen graphics say Hamilton is running in P18 at the moment, although he is currently leading the timesheets. Hamilton braking into the final complex. The Mercedes again looking very stable underneath him through the final corner. A little bit of a lift, then hard back on the power. Hamilton not opening DRS down the start-finish straight. I wonder what he's doing here. Is this a race simulation, I do wonder. His lap time, a 1:28.099, 3.8 seconds down on his best. Are Mercedes running a race simulation here in the final minutes of practice, rather? Almost said qualifying. If this were qualifying, Mercedes would be in big trouble with that sort of pace. Marcus Ericsson running very wide through turn 3. He gets away with it with the run-out curbing. Just a little bit of a lockup on the right front. Esteban Ocon in slow motion replay, coming down into turn 3, hard on the brakes. We see the DRS close, and nothing too dramatic going on with the Force India. I don't see any sparks flying up out of the back. Just very nice slow motion shots through the heat haze. Lance Stroll in the Williams, running ever so slightly wide through, looks to be turn 1. We can see the front end of the car bouncing up and down over the corrugations in the curbing. However, he gets away with it and is able to continue. Max Verstappen in the second Red Bull, coming through the end of Sector 1. See lots of sparks coming from the front end of the Red Bull. I mentioned this in the review video of the car in launch spec when it was first unveiled. Red Bull's still running a lot of rake in that RB13 chassis, and that's certainly contributing to the amount of sparks that we are seeing out of the front end of that Red Bull. Verstappen about to come to the end of Sector 2. He is well off the pace. He is 3.2 seconds off the pace, it would seem. 53.847 the intermediate through Sector 2. It appears that teams are now running race simulations, high fuel runs, I would say, because these times are nowhere near the ones that these very same cars and very same drivers were setting mere minutes ago. And yes, it could potentially mean that they are running, for example, Verstappen running the 20th best time through that given sector at this moment. Verstappen not running DRS through the start-finish straight either, so therefore I have to say that that is intentional. There's not any sort of problem on Hamilton's or Verstappen's car. They are simply running race simulation, so perhaps this is the pace that we could come to expect during the first few laps of the Grand Prix. Lap times from the front runners in the high 128s, low 129s. One of the Renaults was on a hot lap and apparently has slowed significantly. I believe that is Julian Palmer. And I'm not entirely sure what the problem on the Renault is, but he was on a hot lap and he apparently slowed down rather abruptly. He had the DRS open down the start-finish straight, Alain Prost looking on in the Renault garage looking somewhat concerned. I don't know if we could read anything into that. One of the Haas cars on track once again. I believe it is Grosjean coming down to the end of Sector 1. He is certainly on a qualifying simulation with 3:30 left in the session. That Haas certainly looking very stable indeed through the second sector of the Albert Park circuit. Through 9 and 10, the Haas visibly slower than a lot of the other cars, but again, to be expected, this is not necessarily a front-running team, but we do know that they are capable of flashes of brilliance, particularly here in Australia. We will see if they could replicate their career-beginning feat last year, finishing P6 with Romain Grosjean. Grosjean going to be hampered by traffic. One of the Mercedes is in front of him. I do believe it is Lewis Hamilton warming up to a hot lap. We'll see if that impacts Grosjean's time at all. Indeed, it probably did. Grosjean remains P8, 1.9 seconds behind the leading time of Lewis Hamilton. In replay, we see Grosjean. He has complained about the brakes on this Haas before, both last year and in testing, and indeed, he has run into some sort of a minor brake problem, locking up the right front coming into turn 3. No big deal. The drivers do this a lot, and of course they are very skilled and they know how to compensate for that. Of course, no ABS anti-lock braking system in these Formula 1 cars. It is all controlled with the driver's left foot in most cases. Drivers practice left foot braking in these cars as the steering column comes down between the driver's feet. However, Grosjean able to compensate for that and get on his way. Daniel Ricciardo looks like he is done with running, at least for this session. He is out of the car, helmet off, talking to one of the engineers and drinking some sort of beverage out of a Red Bull container. I doubt it is actually Red Bull, however. As a side note, I have always wondered if the Red Bull drivers actually drink Red Bull. I would say drinking a caffeinated beverage, particularly one as caffeinated as Red Bull, is not a good idea if you're about to do something that is quite physically demanding and very dehydrating. Caffeine is a somewhat powerful stimulant, and it will dehydrate you even more. Picking up Grosjean again in the Haas. No, I beg your pardon, that is Kevin Magnussen. Since both of the Haas cars are on track, I am led to believe that the sick engine I heard from one of the Haas's before was just a different engine or hybrid map mode, probably charging the battery because it sounded very, very rough indeed. However, both the Haas cars are on track and running with decent pace. Magnussen gaining on Perez at the moment. Coming down through the last 45 seconds now in FP1 from Melbourne 2017. Magnussen coming across to complete Sector 2. The time is 52.643. He is almost exactly 2 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. He is right now on the gearbox of Sergio Perez in the Force India. He goes for an overtake, but thinks better of it. We almost saw our first real live-action overtake of 2017. However, Magnussen said, let me not bin it before the second practice session. Haas probably short on spares, being an American team operating all the way down under in Australia. So Magnussen definitely thinking discretion is the better part of valor. Will he make it to the line before the checkered flag falls? I do not believe so. There's the checkered flag, and Magnussen crosses the line. Magnussen's final lap time, a 1:30.466. Of course, he was balked by Perez on that lap, 6.2 seconds down on Lewis Hamilton as the checkered flag flies. It would appear that all of the cars, mostly all of the cars, have now finished circulating, and therefore we have our final order for FP1 for Australia 2017, our first official race weekend session in the books. In first position, we have Lewis Hamilton. Second for Valtteri Bottas. So Mercedes topping the timesheets in first and second for the first practice session. They are followed by Daniel Ricciardo in third. and Max Verstappen in 4th. He definitely made a good recovery in that Red Bull. Whatever gearbox gremlin he had at the beginning of the session has certainly been solved. Raikkonen and Vettel, 5th and 6th for Ferrari. Are they testing their sandbags? That remains to be seen. In 7th, Felipe Massa for Williams, returning from his brief retirement, 1.9 seconds back from Lewis Hamilton in P1. He is followed in P8 by Romain Grosjean for Haas, 9th, Nico Hülkenberg for Renault, and 10th, Sergio Perez for Force India. In 11th and 12th, the two Toro Rossos of Carlos Sainz and Daniel Kvyat. In 13th, we have Lance Stroll for Williams. 14th is Fernando Alonso. Not a bad showing for that recalcitrant McLaren. 15th for Marcus Ericsson in the first of the Saubers. 16th for the pink Force India of Esteban Ocon. 17th for Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. 18th for Pascal Wehrlein in the second Sauber. 19th for Jolyon Palmer in the Renault. And in P20 and last is Stoffel Van Dorn for McLaren Honda. On the cooldown lap there, Grosjean just radioing to the Haas pits if he is allowed to overtake on this cooldown lap. Technically speaking, the virtual safety car is deployed at this time as the cars rotate back into the pits, and under safety car conditions, you are not allowed to overtake. Therefore, I guess everybody has to hold station as they get back into the pit lane. However, now on the world feed, the final results are being posted. First place for Lewis Hamilton, his best lap on the Ultrasofts, 1:24.220. Second place, half a second behind Valtteri Bottas, also on the Ultrasofts. So far, have we seen the true pace of the 2017 cars? Maybe yes, maybe no. I tend to err on the side of maybe no, because there is still another practice session to come later on today, as well as free practice 3 on Saturday morning before the all-important qualifying session. If it is wet on Saturday, we may well not see the true pace of these cars in Australia. However, certainly, we do have some more information now to bounce around in our heads as we await the second practice session and then, of course, the qualifying session to come tomorrow. Just going through the rest of the timing screens, not seeing anything unexpected here. Just absolutely terrible to see McLaren running so far down the field. Fernando Alonso showing just how gritty and determined a driver he is, lifting that car up into P14 in practice, but Stoffel Van Dorn all the way down there in P20. It's not the way he wanted to make his, technically speaking, Formula One comeback, but in all practical terms, it is his Formula One debut, but just awful performance for McLaren Honda. They had better get their act together. That's all I have to say about that. Until next time, however, I thank all of you very, very much for joining me on this inaugural Formula One coverage live stream of Free Practice 1 for Australia 2017. Thank you all very, very much for watching, and thank you for contending with the bit of the delay that we do have to deal with here, just because this signal has to go into space and back again to get to wherever you are watching from your corner of the world. Until next time, Ferrariman601 saying thank you very, very much, and we will see you soon.